I started telling you last week about this idea of the voyage to the underworld, and I want to tell you a little bit more about that. Jung in particular conceptualized the voyage to the underworld as a journey into the unconscious, and the unconscious for the psychoanalyst is a place of fantasy and dream and implicit presupposition and habit, and that's all correct. You know, there is an unconscious, and it's perfectly reasonable to conceptualize it that way. The big difference, I think, between the psychoanalysts and the later more empirical scientists is that the psychoanalysts sort of envisioned your psyche as a place of living partial personalities instead of cognitive computational systems. You know, they took into account the fact that you're alive and that the parts of you are alive. And you know, there's a neuroscientist named Gazzaniga. I don't know how to say his name. Gazzaniga. That's wrong. Gazzaniga. Yeah, I think that's it. Anyways, he did some of the earliest experiments on split brains. And so sometimes if you have intractable epilepsy, which I wouldn't recommend, by the way, one of the surgical procedures for mediating its negative effects is something called you cut the corpus callosum, and it's a very large structure in the brain that connects the two separate hemispheres. And you know, it's not obvious why we have two separate hemispheres, although I'll tell you a little bit about why I think it is. But anyways, they do communicate. And what Gazzaniga demonstrated was that you could tell one hemisphere something without the other one knowing, that both hemispheres were conscious and that the consciousness was somewhat independent. Really strange. It's very makes very interesting reading. You know, because it suggests that fragments of ourselves, you could think of, you have fragments of yourself within you that are like low resolution representations of you, you know, and the psychoanalysts would think of those more as, they're kind of like one-eyed giants. That might be a way of thinking about it if you were thinking about it in a fantastical way. So there's the angry you, and you know, you've all come in contact with the angry you. It's rather rigid. That's the first thing you might say about it. It's impulsive and short-term. It doesn't think much about the past, unless it's bad things about whoever you're angry at, in which case it thinks about them a lot. It's not too concerned with long-term future consequences, and mostly it wants to be right. And you know, when angry you disappears and normal you, assuming such a thing exists, reappears, you can be perfectly shocked about how angry you behaved. And in fact, sometimes if angry you really gets out of hand, like it might in a battle, in a war, it might do things that you just can't imagine that you would do. And under those circumstances, you can reveal parts of yourself to yourself that are so foreign and so horrifying that it will leave you with post-traumatic stress disorder. Because it is the case that many, but not all, people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, especially if it's battlefield related, get it because of something they did rather than something they saw or something that happened to them. And that's really worth thinking about, you know. I mean, there's a lot of weird potential nested inside people, and you know, you don't see it under normal circumstances because the circumstances are normal. And part of the reason that we like the circumstances to be normal is precisely so that we don't see those parts of people we don't want to see.